Alright guys, I'm going to go back over the Unit 3 multiplying and dividing decimals Form A paper that we did as a classwork assignment. So let's look at number 1. How does the placement of the decimal point change when you divide 45 and 23 hundredths by 10? So if I'm thinking about the decimal point, I know that my number increases if I'm multiplying, but it's going to decrease because this is a whole power of 10 when I divide. So when thinking of that, I know that if I move my decimal towards the front one time, that represents by 10, because I'm only making a difference with my number by 10. So my decimal would end up being at 4 and 523 thousandths. But in keeping in remembrance that the decimal point doesn't really move, it's actually the number. So now this asks, the number moves where? So if I were to pick this number up and shift it over, that number actually moved one place back to the right. Okay? So let's look. It moves one place to the right because 45 and 23 hundredths divided by 10 equals 4 and 523 thousandths. So even checking, this is the correct answer. This is the correct answer. Now, where did I shift my decimal? I had to shift my decimal when I'm drawing it one place over to the left. But my number moves when I'm dividing to the right. Look at it, number 2. If one rod, this is a rod, equals 10, which representation shows 10 by 10? Well, let's think about that. If I'm thinking of an area model, if I had 10 going this way, if I were to fill that all in, 10 going that way, and represent 10 going that way, then what would that be? I can fill that in, make an area model, and it would be 10 by 10. This should really look more like a cube. So looking at that, what's 10 to the power of 2? It's 100. And that would be the same because length times width would give me 100. So which model shows a representation of 10 by 10 or 10 squared? That would be B. Number 3. This should be really easy. Looking at a power of 10. When I know that I'm multiplying by a power of 10, my number's going to get larger. Okay? So if I have, I'm going to rewrite this as 10 squared, which is really 100, then I have 2 places that I'm going to end up shifting this number. Right? So I'm going to rewrite my number 3 1/10, and I'm going to literally, like, if I could pick up this number and I can shift it over 2 places to the left. But since I can't grab my number, then I'm going to move my decimal back 2 places. So then that gives me a new decimal placement behind the 0, which is a whole number, so I don't need it. And my answer is 310. Number 4. Another way to write 10 to the power of 3 is, well, let's look at it. What is 10 cubed? It's the same as 10 times 10 times 10. Which one matches? That would be C. Alright, number 5, we really had to pay attention to this and close read. What is the value of the 2 in the product, so product means a multiplication problem, of 27 thousandths times 10 to the power of 3. Well, I know that because this is a base 10 number, that my number here is going to increase. How many times is it going to move over? It's going to move over 3 times, getting larger. So again, I can't pick up my number, but I can push my decimal. So that's 1, 2 times, 3 times, because it was to the power of 3. So my new decimal goes here, so I'm going to rewrite that number. I'm not going to put the 0 in front of a whole number because I don't need a 0 in front of 27. So now let's reread the question. What is the value of the 2 in the product? So this is the 2. And looking at the place, it's not in the 1's place, it's in the 10's place. So what's the value? It would be 20. 20 is the value, and that would be the correct answer. Number 6. Another way of writing 87 times 10 to the power of 4 is what? Well, right away I could see that that's 87, and it's the same as 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. So which one shows that? That would be A. Number 7. Martin is going mountain climbing at Snowmass Mountain in Snowmass Mountain in Colorado. The height of the mountain is 14 by 10 cubic feet. Well, cubic has 10 to the power of 3, right? What is the height of Snowmass Mountain written as a whole number? So again, all they did was just take the area of that to figure out the height of it. So I would take 14 and multiply 10 to the power of 3. As we know, what's that the same as? 10 times 10 times 10. This would be 100 times 10, which is 1,000. The shortcut is to count the zeros. There are 3 zeros. So now when I rewrite this, it's the same as 14 times 1,000, which is 14 with 3 zeros. So the correct answer is C. Did I have to do all of that work? No, but I wanted to show you what was really happening. Okay, let's look at number 8. Clinton decided to buy 300 shares of stock in an electronics company. Each share cost $60. Which of the following could he use to find the total amount he will pay for the stock? Well, let's look. Let's look at our answer choices. They've broken it up as 6 and 3. Well, do I see a 6 and 3? Yes. I have a 3 here. I have a 6 here. So that would be 6 times 3. How would I get 60? I would have to multiply this by 10 to get 60. How would I get 300? Well, I would have to multiply 3 times 100, right? So let's look. Now I'm going to cross multiply that to get 300. 10 times 100 would be how many zeros? 3. So that would mean that this is 6 and 3 times 10 to the power of 3, because I have 10 here and I have 100 there. The other shortcut is count my zeros. I have 2 zeros there. I have 1 0 there. 2 plus 1 is 3. 10 to the power of 3. So the correct answer would be B.
Mommy, did you hear?
Number 9. So, they gave us an example up here of what this should look like. So, let's look at the example. They had 45,321 divided by 10 to the power of 3. Well, the decimal began here. But what happened to it? If I look, I can see that it pushed in 3 times. Well, I'm going to have to do the same thing to this number, so I'm going to rewrite it. 9 and 62 hundredths. Now, which direction did that decimal go? Well, it started here because it was a whole number, and it ended up here between the 4 and the 5. So that means I pushed in with my decimal to the left 3 times. So that's what I'm going to do. 1, 2, 3. So there's the new placement of my decimal. And now I'm going to annex zeros in those 2 places where I didn't have a number. So my new number looks like this, and there's the answer, B. Number 10. Joan estimates the product of 2 numbers to be 49. What might the factors be? So that means if I estimate, round, my answer should end up being 49. Well, what can make 49? Well, let's look at A. I have 7/10 times 7/10. Well, that's 2 decimals. So that's 1 decimal place, 2 decimal places. When I multiply, I get 49. Now I bring in my 2 decimal places, and that becomes 49 hundredths. There's a huge difference between 49 cents and 49 wholes. Go blow your nose. Let's look at B. I have 7 whole times 7/10. Again, I just multiply 7 times 7, which is 49, and then I count my decimal places. I have 2, push in 2, that's 49 hundredths as well. Again, huge difference from 49. Let's look at C. 7 2/10 times 6 5/10. Well, circle the wrong thing. I'm going to look at my 7. That's the place that I need to round, and I'm going to look to the right. That's a 2. That 2 tells me that my 7 would estimate to be about the same. Okay? The 6 5/10, I want to round to the nearest whole. So I look at the 6, that's my whole number, and now I look over to the right, that's a 5. 5 tells me to push this number up 1. So now, what's the estimate of the product here? It's a whole number 7 times the whole number 7, which equals 49. So I found the correct answer, which is C. If I look at D, 7 5/10 rounds to 8, and this rounds to 7, which would give me 56. So that couldn't work as an estimate. All right, shade the grid to represent 2/10 by 3/10. So I'm going to shade it in. This was the most missed problem, not because of the shading, but because of counting the product. Okay, so now I'm going to do 3/10. That's 1/10, 2/10, 3/10. Now I'm only going to check where these overlap. So this overlapped here, and it was also shaded in here. So all I have of overlap is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, not tenths, because this whole line would be a tenth. I would need all of these filled in to be 6/10. This is 6/100ths. So I have a 0 in the tenths place because I have no tenths, but I do have 6/100ths. This was the most missed problem. And guys, if you just solved it, you would have seen that you had the wrong answer. So 2 times 3 is 6, but I have 2 decimal places. So again, start at the back. 1, 2, push in 2 times, set my decimal, and put a 0 in the place that was missing, and that shows me 6/10. Alright, number line. I had 1 6/10, and I'm dividing it by 4/10, which means I need to grab 4/10 each time. So I'm going to count those and place them on my number line before I start jumping. So remember, I don't count where I start because it's already been counted from. This is 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4/10. 1, 2, 3, 4/10. Okay, and as you can see, that's a 0 here. Alright, so now I'm going to go and count my jumps, and I count from where I start. I'm starting at 1 6/10. So this is 1. That's 2 jumps. That's 3 jumps. That's 4 jumps. So how many whole groups of 4/10 could I get? I could get 4 whole groups of 4/10. Notice there is no decimal in this answer. Michelle has cut a piece of yarn that is 9 5/10 yards long. She needs to cut the yarn into pieces of fringe that are each 5/10 of a yard. So that means I need to get as many groups of 5/10 as I possibly can. How many pieces of fringe can she cut from the yard? So that means that I'm going to divide by 5/10 to find out how many of those groups I can have. I cannot divide using a decimal. So what am I going to do? I'm going to multiply both sides times 10 to get rid of this decimal because it's only one place over. So now I'm going to rewrite that as 5. And I have to do the same thing here and bring that up. So now I'm going to rewrite that as 95. Sorry, that might look like a 100 the way that I wrote my division symbol. Okay, so now I'm going to rewrite it. Now it's just 5 into 95. Well, 5 can go into 9 one time. That gives me 4, bring down. That gives me 9, 45, subtract. Okay, so what am I left with? I'm left with 19. Most of you guys did a great job with that one. Number 14, rattlesnake measured at birth 18 5/10 centimeters long. After several months, the scientists captured and measured the rattlesnake. It was 6 5/10 centimeters long. It was 6 5/10 times as long as it was at birth. So that means I'm going to multiply it. And remember what I said, you could use lattice. It didn't matter how you solve this. But you have to remember to put your decimals back in. Can you close that door for me, buddy? Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to slice up my boxes, and now I'm going to multiply. 6 times 5 is 30. 6 times 8 is 48. 6 times 1 is 6. Okay, now 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 8 is 40. And 5 times 1 is 5. Okay, now remember, I just add up everything. That's 2, that's 10, carry 1, becomes 2, and then 1 carried over. Okay, so now I'm ending up with 1, 2, 0, 2, 5. Well, let's go back up and count our decimal places. I had 1 decimal place here and 1 decimal place here, so that makes 2 decimal places that I have to count for. And it was given to me in centimeters, so the correct answer is D, 120 and 25 hundredths centimeters long. Let's look at number 15. Marla says the product of 3/10 times 45 hundredths will be less than 1. Is she correct? Well, yes, she's correct, because there's no 1 to begin with, right? So she only has a part, which is 3/10. Actually, it's 45 hundredths, and she wants to know how much of 3/10 is 45 hundredths. Well, that's a part of a part, so there's no way you can have 1, because there's only a part of a part. Okay, so now let's solve. This is also the next most missed. Guys, I don't understand. We know how to multiply by 1. What's 23 times 1? Remember what I said before. We ignore all these decimals. These decimals don't mean anything to us while we're multiplying. 23 times 1 is 23. Right? Now, I'm done, because I don't need to multiply this 0 out. I can. It'll just give me more zeros. Not a big deal. Now I go back and I count my decimal places. I have 1 here and I have 2 there. 1 plus 2 is 3 decimal places. So 1, 2, 3. This is where my decimal goes. I annex a 0. My answer is 23 thousandths. Most missed problem. Second most missed problem, and that's because we just weren't paying attention. This is 4 and 5/10 divided by 5 hundredths. If I move this 1 time, it's still a fraction, so I have to move it twice. So what am I doing? I'm multiplying by 100. Now this becomes 5. If I do that over here, I move it over twice, annex a 0, it becomes 450. See that? So now 5 can go into 45 9 times, right? Or if you do like you did in 4th grade, 9, and then you do your 45, but then you have 1 more place, you annex the 0, annex the 0 there. Don't forget what you've learned in another grade just because you're applying new skills. The answer is 90, not 9. Okay? For number 18, all you had to do was just say, I add it all up, or you can add it up. The biggest problem is I have friends that didn't line up their decimals. Remember, when we add, subtract, or compare, we line up our decimals. This is just adding up the partial products. I have 6 whole, so I put 6 whole there. I'm going to annex 2 zeros. I had 1 and 2/10. I write my 1 and 2/10. I'm going to annex 1 0. I have 8 hundredths. I put my decimal, a 0 in the tenths place, a 8 in the hundredths place. I have 4 tenths. Drop my decimal, carry a 4 over in the tenths place, and a 0 just to annex, so I made sure I had every place filled where I had a decimal. Can I annex zeros in the front? Absolutely. Alright, so now I have 8, I have 6, bring my decimal straight down. It doesn't move, guys, it goes straight down. And then 6 and 1 is 7. Okay, let's look at the next one on the back. Alright, so now, what am I really doing? This is area model. I have 2 and 7/10, so I have 2 and 7/10. I have 3 and 5/10, so I have 3 across and 5/10. Well, I do the same thing as I do when I'm doing area model. First, I multiply 2 times 3. Then I multiply 2 times 5/10. Right? It gave me a product of 1 because I had 2 times 5 is 10, but I pushed in 1 decimal place. Alright, so let's look at the next one. I'm going to do the same thing. 7/10 times 3. 7 times 3 is 21, but I pushed in 1 decimal place. Alright, and then the next one is 7/10 times 5/10. So a 7/10 was missing here. 7 times 5, as we know, is 35, but I have 1 decimal place here, 1 decimal place there, so that's 2 decimal places I push in. So that becomes 35/100ths. Now, how do I get my answer? Remember, my answer is sitting by the equal signs. So first I have 6. I'm going to annex 2 zeros because I'm going to need them. I saw that there was a 35/100ths there. 2 and 1/10 right here, so I'm going to annex 1 0. 1 whole, I'm going to annex 2 zeros. And then 35/100ths, that was the reason why we were annexing all those zeros. And now I'm just going to bring my decimal down, add, subtract, compare. I bring my decimals down and line them up. So 5, 4, and then that makes 9. So what is my answer for 2 and 7/10 times 3 and 5/10? It is 9 and 45/100ths. Y'all have a good night.